Believe it or not, baptism is a declaration of spiritual warfare. Peter explains that idea in a perplexing passage. It's odd to us, but people in Peter's day would have known just what to do with it.
For Christ also suffered once for sins, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the Spirit, in which also he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison who were formerly disobedient, when the patience of God waited in the days of Noah. Corresponding to this, baptism now saves you, an appeal to God for a good conscience through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who is at the right hand of God, with angels and authorities and powers having been subjected to him.
At first glance, Noah, a good conscience, spirits in prison, baptism, angels, authorities, and powers seem to have little to do with each other. And baptism can't save us. Believing in Jesus saves us. What's going on here?
To understand what Peter wants to say here, we have to understand that, like Paul used Adam as an analogy for Jesus in some of his teaching, Peter uses Enoch.
And Enoch walked with God, and he was no more, for God took him.
We don't learn much about Enoch in the Old Testament, just 3 verses. He walked with God after living 365 years, and God took him to heaven. That makes it hard to see much of an analogy, but we have to remember that New Testament writers read other books besides the Old Testament, and one of those books is called 1 Enoch. 1 Enoch isn't inspired, but biblical writers quote from some uninspired books they knew their readers were familiar with. Those familiar books help them make their points. That's what Peter is doing in 1 Peter 3.
The book of 1 Enoch says the fallen sons of God were imprisoned after they rebelled. Peter's second epistle mentions those rebels being held in chains of gloomy darkness. In 1 Enoch, the fallen sons of God ask Enoch to see if God would forgive them. Since Enoch had God's favor, they thought it was worth a try. In 1 Enoch, God rejects the plea of the fallen angels after Enoch reports to him. He sends Enoch down into the abyss. He descends to the spirits in prison to announce their doom. That's the point of analogy for Peter. Just as Enoch descended to the fallen spirits, so Jesus descended into the same realm to proclaim something to them. What did he proclaim? They thought that since Jesus was in the realm of the dead, they had won. Jesus told them they were wrong, and he rose on the 3rd day to prove it. They were still doomed.
But how does this connect to baptism and a good conscience?
An appeal to God for a good conscience in 1 Peter 3 means a sincere pledge. In essence, baptism was a loyalty oath and repeated the message Enoch and then Jesus gave to the demonic powers and anyone present of just whose side of the spiritual war you were on.